All right, well, good morning, everybody. Basically, give you a quick outline of what we'll be going over today. We have 5 trends that I'd like to cover with the group here today. We'll talk a little bit about some do's in terms of how you can better prepare yourself for the environment that we're currently in. And then I want to focus the last part of my presentation actually on IoT, a phenomenon that is, I think, going to be important to all of us. So just a quick bit about myself. This is I call it the why should you care slide. Again, I'm Darin Andersen. I've been in the cybersecurity business for about 15 years now. Funded and founded a few companies. I've also developed a number of initiatives around cybersecurity. One of the first was participating in a group of about 30 individuals who created the Stop, Think, Connect campaign. That's sort of the Smokey the Bear campaign, if you will, for cybersecurity. Has anybody heard of the Stop, Think, Connect campaign, by show of hands, by the way? Not a lot. And it actually shows a big part of the challenge. That program was created some 7 years ago now, and it actually came out of some additional technology. It's interesting when you look at the Smokey the Bear campaign, how many people have heard of the Smokey the Bear campaign? Like pretty much everybody in the room. Different time, different place, different set of circumstances, trying to keep people from throwing matches out to burn up forest land. What's instructional about that is the challenges that we have in building and getting our messages out. And on the one hand, we want to empower our environments from a productivity side, but also secure and actually make private and create privacy in that as well. I also helped organize an organization called Secure Inner East City. Our goal there was to make San Diego the first cyber-secure model city to be cyber aware, prepared, and educated. So how do you make an entire community cyber safe? And I actually believe that there will be a value someday in cyber safe cities. So if you look at Men's Health magazine or Cosmopolitan and you see the 50th dog-friendliest cities, could you imagine a time when it'll be the most cyber secure cities? Because if cyber is a form of crime, people want to live in safer communities. So there'll be a value, I believe, in the future of communities that secure themselves more than other communities. In 2012, I started an organization called CyberTECH. The idea of CyberTECH is to provide a place for cybersecurity professionals, and now more than ever, Internet of Things professionals, to come together and have conversations about how to keep their new products rolling off the product line secure and private while they're delivering these new great technologies. And just recently, I was involved with the governor's task force, where I'm the subcommittee chair for the economic development component of that of the governor's cyber task force in California. And we founded Cyber California, which is an industry-led initiative that brings together large partners like HP, like McAfee, and others to make California a hub for cybersecurity. But not only cybersecurity, but think about the opportunities in California to bring together the great tech that we have in Silicon Valley and match that up with the strong cybersecurity that we have and also the privacy piece that California brings. A little bit about my own background. My day job is I have a strategic consultancy and incident response firm called Cyber United. We provide boutique services for very large global customers, help them with their pre-incident response issues around cyber, and also any post issues if they find themselves in trouble. So I wanted to start off with the idea of this idea of bring your own insecure device. If you think about it, starting in about 2008, 2009, we started having our employees and colleagues bringing their devices into the office. And actually, Intel was one of the first companies to see this as an opportunity and then to begin to think of what the productivity, security, and privacy implications of that were. So the bring your own secure device is a kind of, in my mind, a consumer revolution taking place in the workplace where all these devices were flooding onto our networks. And we hadn't done a lot of thinking about how to keep those things secure. And so it really kicked off a lot of thinking, not only about how to maximize the productivity side of it, but also how to make these devices secure on our networks, because they're piling onto our networks. And also, ironically, there becomes this issue of how do you maintain the privacy of those devices for our internal customers. So along with this, you have a number of critical trends, and I call it an unprecedented convergence of technologies, of platform changes in our business models. And if you really think at some of the key things that occurred while this whole BYOD phenomenon is occurring, you've got the convergence of cloud, big data, what I call supercomputing, the ability to do things in real time that theoretically we could have only done, not theoretically, but in actuality, could only have done 5 years ago with supercomputing. Like literally you'd have to run those problems in a supercomputer lab to get the results to have any real-time value. Machine learning and predictive analytics. The evolution of AI, which has really been empowered by the delivery of strong big data analytics and supercomputing, has allowed us to take systems that formerly didn't work very well, and our artificial intelligence has a little bit of a bad name, but really it's AI that has led to this real-time analytics that we'll talk about when we get to the IoT part of the discussion. You then look at kind of more of the physical infrastructure of our world today, which is connectivity everywhere, miniaturization of the small devices that we wear in our bodies, that get implanted into our home, into our offices, into our pets, into our loved ones, and actually start to look at that as a completely wired environment and the implications that that will have on all of our business. Simultaneously with that, this notion of disruptive platforms, companies like Uber and LinkedIn, the ones that we all refer to, that are totally changing the way that they work, totally changing the way that we work. Companies that don't have any employees, companies that don't have any assets. What they're creating, and what's creating, I believe, this global disruption is the idea that they're building these platform models. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and I would encourage you to be thinking about platform. I'd be encouraging you to think about Internet of Things, because I think this is the game changer. Like, this is our next technology boom. Sensors and GPS, you've got sensors everywhere on everything. The original sort of Internet of Thing sensor actually went onto a cow, and they were actually looking at patterns of cows walking around a field, their feeding time, and their other activities to know what the quality of the beef would be. So you take that notion of being able to monitor and censor almost anything and apply it to any business problem that you have. And that is sort of the next technology phase that we're moving into. The other reason that this is not just a coming phenomenon, it's not just what's happening now, is that the Internet of Things is permeating all industries, defense and cyber, life sciences, health services, and so forth. Key to this is what I call the three legs of the discussion. There's the new technology that you and your companies are actually building and submitting and driving into the marketplace. And then there's a discussion about how do we keep these things secure. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go further. So the model that we use in cybersecurity, it's a common paradigm, is what we call the Cyberkill chain. And what it really describes is the nature of our adversary and what our adversary does in order to exploit vulnerabilities that they find on our networks. When you really drive back this model, you can see that it actually can be applied to any cybersecurity event that we've seen over the last 2 decades. And oh, by the way, did you know that the Chinese have been hacking our networks? And by the way, did you know that there are a number of agents and players out there that have different interests in ours than we have in ourselves and are actually actively trying to disrupt our networks, steal our intellectual property, and actually change the nature of the playing field in ways that probably aren't to our liking. But you can actually drive back their techniques and tactics to the Cyberkill chain. And I won't go through it in a lot of detail. I more want to have it there as a framework because it'll help underpin further parts of the discussion, which is that most of our adversaries are actually adopting a recon approach where they're going out and they're doing due diligence. They're actually looking at your Facebook. They're looking at your LinkedIn. They're reading the way that you structure your corporate email addresses. They're looking at all the aspects of how you drive and communicate your business proposition and the people that drive those messages internally as part of their recon. They're then stealthily and carefully crafting very targeted campaigns. In the security world, we call it APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. Think of it as a kind of an ongoing campaign to collect vital data, information, and other sorts of vital information from inside a company. From that, there's a need to get inside of the network to find a way to break in, to find a way to implant the payload. The payload, which is normally used to extract the information out of the network, is set up and established through a command and control, and that's how the exfiltration typically happens. But the biggest part of it actually normally starts with the human and what I call hacking the human. It's about social engineering. And that's probably in some ways the hardest security problem of all. So let me share with you briefly 5 risk trends that I'd like you to watch over the coming months. And I think that these are things that will help you position your business and things that as leaders of your businesses and serving your customers that you'll be able to apply. The first is what I just touched on, which I call hacking the human. It was mentioned by Ramon and others that one of the biggest challenges that we face is the hygiene problem. It's basic password protection, updating and use of our passwords, and how we actually deploy those policies and procedures and training on our networks. The general focus of hackers is to commit fraud, IT sabotage, intellectual property theft, and tampering of devices. And that becomes a major issue in this emerging Internet of Things market. It's one thing, as my friend would say, to blue screen my computer. It's another to drive my car literally off the road. Trend number 2, supply chain exploits. You can, without fail, look at more than 80% of every recent major attack has been driven by a supply chain exploit. That is some weakness that the bad guys have found in determining some chink in the armor, if you will, along the supply chain of a customer. And most of you know about the Fazio Mechanical Services incident that happened with Target. Now, you've got a lot of vendors that are out there saying, we could have stopped the Target breach. The challenge is you've got a third party that's opening the barn door, and then meantime, Target looking at 130,000 new incidences and alerts every hour. So you've got this data overload issue, trying to dashboard it all to see where the red lights are. Then you've got all these holes along your supply chain, and that's, the adversaries know that, and that's what's being used. So if you look at Target, RSA, Lockheed Martin, all well-known hacks, you see a common theme of exploiting that third party. I think in the coming decade, we're going to see more emphasis and a need and technologies build around protecting employee identity. We've thought of this conversely as insider threat. But if you think about it, the need to actually protect the employee's identity is vital to your organization, because that's what the bad guys are going after. That's the credentials that they're trying to get. They're trying to find your highest level employees that actually have some connection to your most vital information. They're penetrating that organization through that individual, assuming their identity, and then moving laterally in your network to collect information that they want. Once they've got a command and control set up, they have the ability then to exfiltrate that data out. It typically starts with some issue related to your human capital and your people. So if you really think about it and you boil it down, you say, the key is actually how do I protect the identities of the people that work inside of my company every day, right? So you sort of change the paradigm around from what I would call a gate and moat and castle paradigm, which is the bad guys are never going to get in, to we've got to protect what's critical inside the castle walls. And that actually starts with your people. Because if you go back to trend number 1, it's all about hacking people. So if I can keep my people from getting hacked by protecting their identity, I have a much better chance of A, being able to not get hacked, which is, by the way, inevitable. But even in the event that I am hacked, I know how to fight my way out. And that's the new paradigm, by the way. Most savvy IT professionals, and I think you're hearing it throughout your customer base and internally as well, the assumption is that the bad guys are in, right? So let's drop the castle and moat paradigm. Let's focus on fighting our way out. Let's focus on resiliency. Let's focus on what we do to recover after an incident and build that into our capability. There was a study done about 2 years ago, and it talked about major issues and incidences occurring where there was some reputation damage to a major company. And in every case that was followed, the companies would typically lose about 21% of value during the incident itself. And they weren't all cyber incidents. Several of them were, by the way. If you actually look at what the reputation issues were, cyber was actually number 2. Other things like faulty product was at the top of the list, cyber number 2. What was critical, though, is that the companies that took the responsibility had plans in place to actually be resilient and recover from that ended up more than exceeding the loss that they incurred. In fact, they, in most cases, increased the value of their company 30%. So there was a 20% drop, a 20% recovery, and a 30% increase. And the researchers speculate that the reason that there was a positive increase in shareholder value is the incident actually forced actions within the company to discover themselves, to learn, and to rebuild capability. So I would encourage you to look at those capabilities first. And it's all about planning. And what is the hardest thing in business today? The luxury of planning, right? Having that time to sit with the team and to really think about 12 months out, 24 months out. So to me, it's a series of small projects that you're taking on to build that resiliency in. Cybersecurity training, I can't emphasize it enough. I call it sort of 2 pieces. There's what I call the employee hygiene piece, which is all about training all hands in the company at the level and capability that they operate in the company to have the basics. 85% of all breaches actually start from a hygiene-related issue. Now, I told you, just to be clear, that the vector that's most commonly used is the human hack factor. But pursuant to that is finding the employee who isn't doing what they should do because they lack the training, the skills, or the presence of mind to not fall victim. So the key is to match that training of your employee base to an environment which people understand how to be more safe, person by person. So it's really what I call hand-to-hand combat. And then on the other side of that is bridging the skills gap. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we face as cybersecurity professionals is finding enough qualified people. And I think because there's a lot of big companies and players in this room, that we actually, as a community of technologists, need to be mindful of how we build the next generation of cybersecurity thinking technologists. I would venture, how many folks here have an engineering background? Probably a large amount. I'm certain that during the time that you learned how to program, how to engineer your products, there was very little emphasis on cybersecurity or building secure code. And that's understandable, just we weren't thinking about that. We lived in a paradigm that was different around people wanting to get to our stuff. In fact, we preach the opposite. The internet itself is an expression of openness. It's an expression of community. And you have adversaries in the world who absolutely take advantage of that and turn that around and use that against us. And that happens in the secure code space as well. It's actually probably certainly one of the top 5 biggest things we see is exploit of code in order to infiltrate, deliver payloads inside the environment that leads to the future hack. So I want to spend the bulk of the rest of my time talking more about the Internet of Things and how we go about securing that. Actually, from my own point of view, and one of the reasons that I started CyberTech was I was thinking about my 2 kids, both of which are now in college. My son is a sophomore at Colorado College. My daughter's a freshman at Boston University. We live in San Diego, California, which is a vibrant technology community. But there's also weaknesses in our community-based focus on technology. You know, we've got a huge skills gap. We have, on the one hand, 6,000 open tech jobs that we can't fill. And then we have communities outside, like really great places like Austin and Boulder and New York State, where they're also trying to attract that talent. And actually, if you sort of take the concentric circle from there, it's really a global focus on getting the talent. It's the communities that attract the most talent in the future will be the successful communities of the future model. And so we should all be thinking from the perspective of our community, what can we do in our community to strengthen that from a technology factor? So one of the things that I started was CyberTech. We do both the community building from the major cyber areas in the country. And for those of you that don't know, that would be San Diego, California, 2nd largest military payroll, home of SPAWAR, which is the home of the U.S. Navy. Most of their procurement comes out of San Diego. You've got great academic institutions that are studying cybersecurity. arguably home of the unmanned vehicle, lots of work in robotics, et cetera. So you have the basis of a very strong community around cyber. Additionally, you look at San Antonio, Texas, which is the base of the 24th Air Force Command, which is the Air Force Cyber Command. And then you have the Beltway, what I call the three countries of the Beltway, Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C. And their main connection is to government, federal, and the fort, NSA. And then you have Silicon Valley, which I don't classify as cybersecurity, I classify them as security. Great technology, certainly many of them are in cybersecurity, but really it's not the same orientation as a community. So putting these groups together, we formed CyberTech, and again, one of the main things we focused on is bringing a voice, a common voice of cybersecurity professionals, but also working on startups that are specific to cybersecurity technology. And what we found is key to making our community is bringing the right venture capital, which again comes from Silicon Valley, finding the right technology, which is again attracting that capital, and that human capital. And I will again argue that in the future, that community that brings the human capital to play is the one that's going to be the most successful. So I lead this into our discussion about securing the Internet of Things, which really at its core is three things. One is some device that connects to the internet, right? It could be your Apple Watch, it could be your health monitor, it could be your automobile, it can be your home automation system, and of course it could be all your networks, including your bring your own device. What's the game changer with IoT is the real-time analytics, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail of that in just a moment. Third is cloud services. Most IoT devices report up to a cloud and send additional data and information that helps make the products that are being created smarter. So the idea is we put the device out, it collects information, versus a human collecting information, it's machine to machine, and from that we gather intelligence, which can then be fed back into the product and make the product smarter. So if you look at IoT, there's two general sides to it, the consumer side. So think agriculture, think personal items. And then on the other side, you have what I call industrial Internet of Things. We expect about 60% of investment will actually go into the production side or the industrial side of the Internet of Things. That's where you have a lot of opportunity to enhance productivity. If you think as an analogy, the implementation of robotics in multiple industries over the last 20 years, you can kind of see the path that the Internet of Things is on. It'll be critical to note that the industrial area is probably the weakest in terms of hackability. So if you think about the IoT, I generally describe it as things having identities which operate in a smart mode. And they use intelligent interfaces and algorithms to actually build a repository of data, which is churned and turned into information. We then connect it up and communicate it in some kind of social environment with some user context around it. To give you by the numbers, the Internet of Things is expected by IDC to be a $5 trillion, that's with the T, market, building over the next 20 years, which, by the way, is not that far away. You know, we're talking about 5 years from now. 50 billion devices connected by 2020, lots of data being generated. And some of the biggest opportunities, as I mentioned, is on the cost side, reducing cost, enhancing productivity. And that's why we'll see a lot of this effort being turned out in, on the industrial side of things. A positive economic impact of $1.9 trillion. And then I want to give you a kind of a concrete example of the opportunity between the Internet of Things. So would anybody know why the garbage business is worth $300 million? So John Chambers stated at his CSE consumer show last year that he sees the garbage business as being some $300 million business and growing. And the reason is I give a clear example of a company called Big Belly. Big Belly has an IoT industrial garbage solution. They're actually usually one or two large bins. They're solar powered. They connect to the internet. Why is that meaningful? Why is that disruptive? Why are they disrupting, not being disruptive? They're disrupting, not being disruptive because that solar panel communicates back to an intelligence system which knows exactly how much garbage is in the bin. It compacts the garbage in the bin, so you get about 3 times more capability in the bin. It also solves some very interesting social problems. I actually am a cyclist. I know I'm not the thinnest looking cyclist, but I do cycle. And there's an area in San Diego by the airport, and these big belly bins are there along the way. And what I've noticed is we've seen a big decrease in the number of homelessness in that area, and that's because they can't get in and collect the garbage, which arguably belongs to the city, right? The city actually puts out city bins. You collect garbage, including recyclables. They handle the cost side by having the garbage dumped. They actually collect the recyclable side, and they're supposed to be used that as revenue to offset the cost, right? The big belly device actually allows that. It changes the business model from the point of view of the city. You actually can get the revenue of those recyclables as opposed to having what I call a trap line of people coming through and doing those collectibles. Now, I know there's some social issues in there. I don't want to delve into that too much, but you see the potential. The last thing that I believe is disruptive about Big Belly is they've created a platform. And the platform is a line of global, potentially, communication that occurs every 40 to 60 feet, where you have essentially a transmitter. And now I can collect data. I can sense all sorts of things from your mobile devices, from the Strata device on your bike going by, and from all the other sensors that are going by, and I'm censoring all that information and data. And so now I'm essentially laying out a global network of sensoring devices. So that's why the IoT, as it pertains to trash, is a $300 million business. And I'll leave you with one more that's always slightly uncomfortable, but I always ask people, why would you want a sensored toilet? What is an IoT toilet? It's a medical device, right? It actually monitors you on a daily basis. So instead of you going to the doctor, you sort of become the proactive patient, and you can actually actively monitor your health on a day-by-day basis. These are the kind of disruptions I think we'll see over the next decade. So again, I talked about the building blocks, which is IP connectivity, real-time analytics, and cloud. These are the kind of devices that we're starting to see, appliance-based, again, the consumer side, home-based. What has really been the game changer, as I mentioned earlier, is that we now have literally millions and soon to be billions of sensors that are out there collecting all sorts of interesting information, and that's being vectored and fleshed out with additional information, time of day, seasonality, all the things that actually go into making up a model that informs a smart system. What the game changer has been is that now with the machine learning and the ability to classify and drive this data and do quick analysis on it, we actually can give feedback to the system in real time. And that allows us to share knowledge instantaneously across the device, across the network, across the city, across the globe. So think about the Internet of Things as it relates to what I call the anomalic building. You have some 32 sensoring devices that are all collecting information from that building, almost like a human organism. Pumps, your IT information, your parking information, how full is the garage. Cameras that are monitoring security, badging systems as you come in and out of the building. Imagine you could vector all that information back. So when you contemplate real security, you can start to actually see how the machines will work for us in the future, how we can leverage technology in order to make our systems smarter and to make our devices more secure. The key, of course, is that you've got to build the security and the privacy in up front. And that's what we at CyberTech advocate. That's what I work on in my own business is how can we help companies see that it's time to build in security up front. Again, when you look at a smart building, the analogy nicely pairs to the idea that you have a smart city. So you take buildings, multiple buildings together, transportation systems together, you have all that additional data and all those additional things working together. Take it down, if you sort of go down to the 5,000-foot view to your household, it's all the things inside of your home that actually will sensor and provide data and information to you as a person living in your home or your family. So in Tesla now, there are 36 onboard computers that actually take different sensor information. Brings up a number of, I think, very interesting questions. What we know is Tesla now has your information. Are you okay with that? I'm not making a value judgment whether you are or not. I'm just saying it's something that you should be aware of. I tend to believe that people trade away in almost every instance their security for privacy. And it's going back to the human challenge. One of the biggest things that we'll face going forward is the system is geared for all of us to trade for convenience, our personal identity, our information, to get something that we want. This actually is going to become increasingly more personal as we start using more and more wearable devices. We've been able to, and I say we, as a community of security professionals, have been able to hack into nearly every industrial device, nearly every medical device, and I think you're seeing more and more as our community starts to share out. And generally speaking, our goal always as a community is to share out the fact that there's vulnerabilities. You know, the white hat side of our community is all about preventative maintenance, if you will, letting companies know that they have these vulnerabilities. And there's definitely a challenge in getting a buy-in, you know, from industrial organizations who haven't been thinking about product security because they haven't been connected to the internet to change that mindset, because that's not how their trains run. However, I'll note that, and I'm picking on TrendNet today. This is a company that provides a security camera, typically inside of a home environment. And you guys might know the story that first a white hat organization actually started live feeding these cameras around the country so that people could understand that they're open, because they were communicating back with TrendNet and there was no response. Long and short of it, TrendNet finally got approached by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, which regulates they're the new sheriff of the internet as it pertains to security, and actually put a 20-year fine and penalty on TrendNet. So TrendNet now has to have an audit every 2 years to adjust and defend their security. So there will be a cost to companies, and it is a reason that you should care. And there are organizations and plans certainly being developed that will drive companies to have to think about security and have to think about privacy. From a pure industrial standpoint, and I'm a capitalist, I think the privacy issue will continue to melt away. In fact, we happen to be, let's say 50% of the vote that says privacy is important. The reality is that a big part of the population of the globe doesn't give a darn about privacy. They're more concerned about driving the productivity into the process. And we'll continue to see that tension between security, privacy, and the technology itself, and vectoring those three things together to create successful and disruptive products as we go forward. So 3 things that you can do to manage the risk. And I just present this kind of on one. It's do but verify. A new trend in our industry is having board of directors come to us increasingly and say, we've been hearing from our security team for the last fill in the blank years that we are secure and protected. And here's what they say the systems are, here's what they say, but we want to verify ourselves. So we have a lot of clients who are approaching us and saying, we need you to come in and do a kind of independent audit. And unfortunately, that's creating some split, between leadership in the company and the security team. But I think this is the kind of wake-up call that's needed in order for security folks, and I'm included in that group, to be more proactive about real security. Understanding what your security framework is key. I can't emphasize hygiene enough. I mean, it's like, telling people, every day that, they should do the right thing, but it really does come down to it in a lot of cases is somehow we've got to spread the global mission and the importance of everyone doing their part to be cyber safe. Everyone doing their part not to throw a cigarette out the window and burn down the forest, right? So it's the problem that we're tackling, and it's a hard problem, and it will take time. I suspect it'll be another 30, 40, maybe 50 years before we really pick up on the importance of this message and begin to look at ourselves as sensors with a digital identity projecting ourselves out to the world. And the need then becomes, I've got to protect my digital life in the same way that I protect my physical life. Third is actively manage your cyber risks through things like insurance, legal, and training. And the bonus of this is I'd like to leave you with the idea that there's an opportunity for each and every one of you here represented as a company to drive new technology in your company specific to creating platform. I really do believe that the companies that can create platforms are the ones that will be successful going forward. The large industrial companies, which many of us represent, are really challenged in that regard. We have to stop thinking of things in the ways that we have for the last 50 years and adopt this new model and exercise a new level of judgment and innovation going forward. And it's going to be hard because there's so much concrete that we've laid as larger companies that it's hard to kind of break out of that. But when you look at, the companies who have not succeeded, who are old-line companies, it's in every case been their ability to see that 10, 20, 30 years out, and someone coming in and taking a part of the market in a completely new way. And I would defy you to show me an example where that wasn't a platform-based company. Is this idea that it's all about the platform is critical, and if you start to conceptualize that as a company, then you can be successful in moving forward and being a disruptor and not being disrupted. So that's all I got. We do host a number of national symposiums each year to help get the word out about what we do. It's anything from what we call our master's version, which is bringing together 60 to 80 cybersecurity experts. We actively invite an industry who are building these products, who are grappling with these products of the Internet of Things, and inviting them into a discussion about security and privacy. So if that's of interest to you as being someone on the manufacturing side, please join us in what we do. We do larger events at RSA, 250, 300, but always bring in sort of top brains and top minds to help drive the discussion. I call this the half the distance to the wall conversation. I'm not sure that we'll ever get there, but I do know that businesses and companies and individuals that define their community as being more secure than less secure will be rewarded for that. So with that, I'll thank you for your time.